There is nothing that will destroy your confidence more than having puny, small arms. Believe me, I was in the same boat, but I do have some good news. There are 3 strategies that we're going to cover in today's video that will guarantee results when consistently implemented into your arm training. Now, before we jump into the 3 techniques, let's quickly go over how our arms are made up so we better understand why these techniques are actually effective. Many people don't realize that we have 3 main muscles that perform elbow flexion. You obviously have the biceps, but then there's the brachioradialis in the forearm, and a muscle that doesn't get nearly enough credit, which is the brachialis. And this is actually the primary elbow flexor. Now, our biceps are easily the most eye-catching, but we need to have equal growth in all 3 of these muscles for an aesthetic arm. Now, in this video, we're going to focus solely on the biceps, but I will have a video that pops up after this one, which will cover how you can grow all 3 equally. And now that we better understand how our arms are actually made up, let's jump into the first tip, which is contracting your triceps. Now, I know you're probably confused because this is a video about growing bigger biceps, but please let me explain because I promise it'll make sense. When performing any curl or exercise in general, it's essential to get full range of motion to reap the most muscle growth gains. When you are performing a curl, if you contract your triceps at the bottom of the exercise, it will fully elongate the biceps and really put a lot more stress on the muscle, which is the goal. Now, this is the principle of reciprocal inhibition. It definitely didn't take me many takes to say that properly. But this refers to the general phenomenon in which the stretch of one muscle inhibits the activity of the opposing muscle. When your muscle is fully elongated, it needs to work much harder to initiate the next rep. And this leads to more muscle fibers being recruited, which is the principle of the length-tension relationship. Now, this is a very important principle, not only for bicep growth, but any muscle growth in general, so I'm going to try and keep it nice and simple. The length-tension relationship is the theory that the amount of tension generated by a muscle depends on how stretched or how shortened it was before it was stimulated. And studies show that if a muscle is at 110 to 120% of its resting length, it creates more total force than it would at its normal resting length. Therefore, making this small but extremely important change is going to make a huge difference in the growth that you see, and just doing it for one set, you're going to feel a huge difference. And now for the second tip, we're going to talk about not flexing your wrists. Now, there isn't anything inherently wrong with flexing your wrist during a bicep exercise. However, this is a typical compensation that we tend to see as the biceps start to fatigue. If you try to keep your palms parallel with the ceiling, this will keep the tension on your biceps and significantly decrease the amount that your forearms are actually assisting. It's a very subtle change, but it can make all the difference in your bicep growth. Now, an exercise that you can perform to visualize our proper wrist position is going to be waiter curls. All you need to do is grab a dumbbell and rest the flat side on both of your hands. It's important that you are resting it on your hands instead of holding the weight where you hook your fingers around. This tip will once again mitigate the amount of work that your forearms will be working. Then you want to curl the weight up, however you want to make sure that you're keeping the top of the dumbbell parallel with the ceiling. If done properly, your biceps will be doing almost all the work with pretty much no assistance from the forearms. And this principle can be applied to pretty much every bicep exercise. In this example, you could see during a normal bicep curl, there's a slight difference between flexing my wrist and keeping my palm parallel with the ceiling. However, this seemingly small change will lead to much more time under tension and ultimately more muscle growth in the long run. Also, I just want to preface that if you have a history of wrist pain or wrist instability, please proceed with caution when doing this. I would initially start with a very light weight and then proceed as you can tolerate. Rather be safe than sorry. And now for the third tip of this video, it's going to be to stop moving your elbows forward. This is another very common compensation that can be observed on almost every bicep exercise. In this video here, you can see how my elbows are moving forward as I bring the weight up. Now, there are 2 main reasons that this happens. The first one is because as our muscles fatigue, we tend to recruit other muscles to try and complete the set. Then the second and most frustrating one is ego lifting.
You stop that right now!
By allowing your elbows to move during any bicep exercise, we risk involving other muscle groups such as the deltoids and the low back, which will significantly decrease the tension placed on the biceps. Please throw your ego out the window and lower the weight. Focusing on strict form and maintaining stable elbows also improves your mind-muscle connection, which ultimately optimizes muscle activation. And compensating this way also significantly increases your risk of a shoulder or low back injury. As you can see in this video here, I am placing a lot of torque on my low back, and even just performing a few sets with this improper form can lead to an acute injury. I promise that if you're doing this right now and you stop, do strict curls, you're going to see significant improvements just from making that small change. Please make sure to keep your elbows tucked out the entire exercise and you're going to get so much more out of it. And if you're consistent and implement all 3 of these tips, you're going to see significant improvements in your overall bicep growth. But don't stop there. Like I mentioned earlier, we have 3 main elbow flexors and we need equal growth in all of them if we want sculpted and aesthetic arms. And that's exactly what I cover in this video here, so check it out now.